So, bit of background about me. My name is Jane. As I said earlier, I'm not Alexandra Packham. I'm using Alex's Teams login for this session. It's Jane Redman, R-E-D-M-A-N. You can find me on LinkedIn. I've worked in high value fundraising, so across corporate trusts, major donors and capital appeals for about 25 years. And I'm an associate fundraising consultant with Tree Fundraising. I'm also a qualified coach, so I do lots of things like team facilitation days and working individually with people on coaching, things that come up like confidence, imposter syndrome, things like that. And I'm a trustee of Air Ambulance, Kent, Surrey and Sussex. So I've got quite a broad background and broad experience. Being a trustee has been really helpful actually in helping to understand it from a trustee's helping to understand fundraising, particularly high value fundraising, major donor fundraising from a trustee perspective. So we're going to start off. Hopefully I can see that you all are in chat, introducing yourself, where you're from, maybe add your LinkedIn address, your LinkedIn profile linked. As an opener, what I thought we could do today, I went to a workshop at my son's school. He's just done his GCSEs, and I went to a workshop recently around growth mindset, which, for those of you who don't know what it is, one of the things, there's lots of bits to it, but one of the things is around seeing failure as a learning opportunity rather than feeling restricted of, oh, that's gone wrong, that's it. I'm not very good at that. It's about actually, maybe that didn't work. What didn't work? What can I learn from it? And really that mindset of, I can learn from this, and this is an opportunity to get better at this. And it made me think, in relation to today, it made me think about the knockbacks we get as major donor fundraisers. Because we all know with trust fundraising it's really tough at the moment, and our trust fundraising colleagues, and some of you might also do trust fundraising, it is tough, and you have to get resilient around getting those no's and those rejections and learning what you can do with them. But I thought also as major donor fundraisers, sometimes things don't go to plan, do they? We might have an ask meeting and maybe someone said no, maybe they've said no, not now, maybe you feel like you've asked for the wrong amount or too much, too little, and we can really easily beat ourselves up about that, can't we? So my question to you today, and it would be great if you could put this in the chat, is how do you bounce back as a major donor fundraiser? So what do you do that helps build your resilience? How do you keep going? What gives you that motivation? And maybe some practical things that you do to build that resilience would be really helpful. While you're doing that, welcome to all the people that have just joined us. If you could make sure that you keep your video and your microphone off, that would be great, because it will help with the recording. And this session is being recorded, and it will be shared with participants, and it will also be put on Tree Fundraising's YouTube channel. I can hear some background noise. So could everybody make sure that their microphone is on mute, please? Because otherwise, when people watch the recording, they hear the background noise rather than me. Great. So let's have a look in the chat and see what you're coming up with. So this is your how do you bounce back? How do you build that resilience as a major donor fundraiser? So what have we got here? We've got every no is one step nearer to another yes. I like that, Kate. That is true, isn't it? Because you learn, don't you, each time. There's always a reason why someone says no. And in my experience, most people just don't say no when you ask them for a gift. There's a reason, isn't there? Maybe it's not the right time. Maybe they've got some unexpected pressures on their finances that they didn't expect. Maybe it's the wrong amount that you've asked for. Maybe it's the wrong part of the project. So there's always things to learn, isn't it? But often it's a not now, isn't it? It's not quite the right time just now. So there's lots we can learn. Anthony says, remind myself why we do this, generating income to support families. So true, isn't it, Anthony? I think that's one of the things that we can do that can help us the most is actually reconnecting to the cause that we work for. If we've had a series of no's and we're feeling a bit, or not now, we're feeling a bit flat or a bit unmotivated, reconnecting with the cause and the people that deliver those services and your beneficiaries can really boost motivation, can't it? Erica says, remind myself of the why. So yeah, similar to Anthony, chat to some of the nurses for some stories about the impact of our work. Yeah, great. Spending time with fellow fundraisers, that's important, isn't it? Especially if you're a sole fundraiser. That's why hopefully these sessions are helpful, because you're connecting with other fundraisers, because otherwise it can be a bit lonely if you're the only one. Being aware of the competition and try to understand that they have to decide who they see at that time that needs the funds. Yeah, sometimes, often actually, there's a lot that's outside of your control, isn't there? Particularly in people's lives, you often don't know what people have got going on. Yeah, so, but also being aware of your causes that are similar to you, and try and understand that they've got these competing asks for demands for funds. Ask for feedback and suggestions how you can improve. Is there a way we could work together in a different way? Yeah, so often it's really important to get a next step, isn't it? If you do get a no, not now, it's really important in that moment to not get despondent and to ask for feedback. You know, would you mind me asking, is this the wrong area of our work that we've asked you to support? Or if now's not the right time, is there a time that would be better, or what would you like as the next step? So the key is just to have a next step, isn't it? Not leave that meeting without a next step, and and then following up on that next step. That's some really good ideas coming in here. Thank you. Really nice to see. One of the things that I used to do, I used to work in a children's hospice, and if I was feeling a bit despondent, I sometimes used to just go and spend time with the nurses or with the families. There was a big kitchen in the middle of the house, and sometimes you could go and have lunch in there with the families, which just helped you connecting to the causes, and connecting to the people, the reason why you're doing it. When I worked for a homelessness charity, we often used to shadow the outreach workers. So you go out on an early morning outreach with the rough sleeper workers who are finding people that are sleeping on the streets. And, it really does help put things into perspective, doesn't it? So I think, yeah, meeting beneficiaries, hanging out with the frontline staff that are delivering your services, and sort of meeting other donors, isn't it? If you're feeling a bit despondent or you've had a few rejections, go and meet a donor that's really close to your cause, that loves, not to ask for money, but just to catch up with them, report back on how they're helping, chat to them about why, what do they love about the charity, what's working for them in the relationship. That can be really motivating, can't it? Great, thank you for all your comments and suggestions there. Hopefully that's been helpful. So, as I said, today is really a chance for you to ask me questions. I can't promise I know the answers, but I'll try my best. And I'm sure out of the 49 people that are here, we can probably pretty much answer most questions that are coming up. So if you've got a question, either pop it in the chat, but put question in front so that I can keep a track of it. Or you can unmute and take your video off and ask a question. So what's coming up for you? What are your challenges at the moment? What are you noticing in your fundraising? What are your concerns at the moment? What are you finding a bit tricky and could do with some help with? Question, great. We're applying for the Big Give Christmas campaign, and it's the first time I'm doing it. The application is underway and all fine, but wondering if anyone has any tips for engaging major donors to pledge. So I'm going to throw that one out to the team because, full disclosure, before I was a fundraising consultant, I was a bit cynical about the Big Give because it always felt like a huge amount of work, and not a huge amount of income coming back. But I was wrong. Here's a good growth mindset. I was wrong, and I've learned since I've been a fundraising consultant. I've worked with smaller charities who have done the big give so well, and it's made a huge difference to their income. And often they do. I've been working with a sustainability charity, for example. They do the green big give, and then they do the Christmas big give, and it works really well for them. And they have a major donor who pledges against it. And they're increasing their major donors through it. So proves me wrong. So, but in terms of like really practical tips, maybe pop those in chat. Could other people help out here? And pop those in chats. You know, what are your big tips for engaging major donors to pledge to the big give? What have you learned? What are your successes? Oh, we've got lots of questions coming in. So here we go. I'm going to do them in order. Hopefully we'll get through more. I'm brand new to major gifts fundraising. What's the best way to begin a new relationship with a major donor? So Alice, is this a donor? I'm assuming, like, is this someone that's already donating? So is already a major donor to your charity, or do you mean the best way to begin a relationship with someone? Have you got someone in mind, a prospect that isn't already giving, and it's a brand new relationship? If you could just unmute, Alice, if you're happy to, and let me know, that's probably the easiest way.
Hello. Yes, it is someone who's already a donor, but obviously I'm brand new, so they don't know who I am.
Great, thank you, Alice. Nice to meet you. Thanks for unmuting. Okay, so what I would do is find out as much as I can about the relationship they have with the charity. You've probably already done the things I'm going to say, actually, but yeah, have a look back through your database or whatever you use to record conversations and interactions with donors, so that you've got a real feel for the area of your work that they are most interested in, conversations they might have had with your predecessors. And then what I would do, you know, being new into role is a fantastic opportunity to pick the phone up, ideally pick the phone up if you can, and just introduce yourself. You know, you're new into role, you may not be new to the charity, but, you know, new to the charity or new into role, spending some time getting to know the people that are already giving. Really wanted to say thank you for your donations over time and give them an update of how much that has been, because sometimes people, especially people who give regularly, don't even realise how much they've given. So that can be nice. Or if they've been giving for, say, 10 years, say, you know, did you know that it's your gift anniversary? It's 10 years that you've been supporting us. And introduce yourself and just say that you're really keen, really looking forward to working with the supporters that you have, and just be curious about them. So that would be what I try and do. You might not have their phone number, they might have opted out of phone calls, or you may not feel really confident about doing that, but I would really encourage you to pick up the phone if you can. But if not, email. And again, but it's a fantastic opportunity to introduce yourself, maybe invite them to a project visit if you work for somewhere where you can invite people to a project visit. If not, ask them for coffee if they're local. Even if they're not, you know, if they're a close donor and they're loyal to the organisation, then, you know, it's worth travelling to see them. And of course, we've got Zoom and Teams, so, you know, you can do things virtually now as well. That's what I do, and good luck in your new role. I'm going to scroll down. Clever instances of donor recognition other than a plaque on a building. Oh, this is a good one, Ross, because we can all get really creative, can't we? So let's have a think about some of. So when I mentioned earlier that I work for Children's Hospice, when we did a tax appeal, the trustees had a policy because they saw the hospice as a home from home, and they wanted to keep it as least like a hospital or clinical setting as possible. So it was, you know, lots of soft furnishings. The beds they were hospital beds, but they didn't look like hospital beds. They were wooden and they were colourful and they looked like children's beds, etc. So when we did the capital appeal, they were really clear that they would not have plaques up saying, you know, this room's been funded by so-and-so, and they didn't even want a donor recognition wall in reception. We had to be really creative, and it was really fun, actually. So I'll give you 3 examples that we did. We had a local family trust that gave £1 million to the appeal, and we used that to allocated it to the family bedrooms, because families and siblings could also stay at the hospice while the children were there. And we were lucky enough to be working with Trisha Gould, who is fantastic interior designer, and she was giving her services free of charge. And so we set up a meeting between them, and they sat down with Trisha and they worked through like all the different colour schemes and the different options for materials, the swatches for the curtains and the bedspreads, the duvet covers, and we just, yeah, they felt really involved. It was really lovely, and it was really fun because you just, well, if you like interior design, which I do, so lots of colours, and you know, it was really creative, and they had that say, that input into what those rooms look like. Another example is the Starfish Foundation made a substantial gift, and that funded the hydrotherapy room. So again, we got them involved in the design of the room, and we had the tiles in, had a huge starfish in them. The tiles around the pool had a huge starfish around them. Wooden Spoon also supported, and that was the multi-sensory room, I think, or might have been soft play, but you know, one of those sort of rooms, and the handles were in the shape of a wooden spoon. So there are ways that you can be creative, and I really like it because it really forced us into actually really thinking, rather than just sort of going for a boring old plaque. But even actually, you know, even donor recognition walls don't have to be boring, do they? If you Google donor recognition walls, there are some brilliant images on Google for donor recognition walls, and you know, depending on where you are, if you're a children's charity, they are so colourful and beautiful and fun. Also, animal charities quite often have like paws, don't they? Rather than just a list of names. I've seen environmental charities have like murals of trees and the donor names of the branches of the trees. It doesn't have to be a donor wall, does it? It can be something in the garden. It could be names on a brick on a path that leads to a particular area that people have funded. Oh gosh, there's so many ideas, aren't there? So apart from what I've said, if anyone's got any ideas that you've done or you've seen that you think are really good, pop them in there in the chat. But also just Google is your friend here, because there are some brilliant examples. What I would say is, if you're planning an appeal and you're looking at donor recognition, make sure you plan that from the start in your planning stages. So make sure you know how you're going to recognise people and at what levels you're going to do that, and make sure that you set some budget aside. Another example is name a seat, isn't it? I worked on a theatre capital appeal and we did name a seat. But it is really important that you know what those costs are going to be, and how long it's going to take to produce these this wall or these plaques or whatever it is you're going to be doing. Anyone else want to unmute and give examples of really good donor recognition that they've seen that isn't a plaque on the wall?
The only thing I'd add to that, Jane, is that I'm looking for ideas as well from anyone in the room around single donor recognition. So rather than an appeal, it might be they're funding a project, but that's where it becomes slightly more difficult, because you're looking at one person perhaps, or one organisation who are funding something that might not be a tangible item. It might be a programme. That was all. Thank you very much for the advice though.
Right. Yeah. So it is trickier, isn't it? What about things like, I know that's not like a plaque or recognition, but you know, what about doing a feature on them in your newsletter, or an interview with them where they get to talk about, you know, maybe, well, about the project and why they got involved and things like that, so that it isn't, so that you're kind of involving them more fully in the project. I've seen that work really nicely. Yeah, so anyone else, any other ideas for when it's a project rather than a building or a group of people that you're recognising, but actually you're recognising a single donor? Just going back to when it is a tangible thing, something that I went to last week was the air ambulance, where I'm a trustee, had an appeal last year to raise money to buy a new helicopter. And they released this week, they did a half-an-hour webinar. You could pay £100 and you could have a name on the underneath of the helicopter. So there's coloured crosses on the bottom of the helicopter. So the helicopter is white and the coloured crosses are green and black. And I think it was about 2,000 dedicators have their name, or, you know, name in memory of someone as a tribute to someone. I did it for my son, so his name is on there, and then they unveiled it this week and they did it through a webinar, and it was really good. It was a great example of kind of good supporter experience, and they did a virtual tour of the airbase at Red Hill, and then they'd done this video of the helicopter taking off, and it was filmed from underneath, so there was a close-up of the names. You couldn't pick out individual names, but, you know, and you saw this helicopter rising with all the names, and then as it went out on a mission, and then you just see the underneath of the helicopter and the cross. And I thought that was really well done. And then we got an email that said it gave you a code and you could type that in, and it sent you a plan so that you could identify where on the helicopter your name, your name, or the person you were attributing to. And I thought that was really good, actually. It was really well done. Let's have a look at some other questions. So we're right at the start of our journey with introducing philanthropy to our charity. Knowing that income may take a while to come in, what does everyone suggest is the best measurable KPI to show whether or not things are going in the right direction? That's a good question, isn't it? KPIs is always really important. So my advice would be, obviously you're going to track income. And that is really important. But there are other things in major donor fundraising that are just as important, equally as important actually, as income. If you are only tracking income, then you're not truly representing the fact that you're building relationships with people and the time that takes. So you're not really representing the value of the work that you're doing. You're only representing what income happens to come in that given period. So from the off, there's all sorts of things you can do, and I would also split them into board level KPIs and operational KPIs. So operational KPIs, you might be looking at things like the number of meetings that you're having, the number of engagement activities, engagement points that you're having with donors, number of engagement events. The problem with quantity KPIs is that you could be having loads of conversations, but the quality of those conversations might not be great. So, you know, and it might not be leading to that relationship progressing. So what you want to try and get is KPIs that show progress. So I would set up some sort of system internally that monitors, you know, you've got people that you've researched, you've got people that you've qualified as prospects, you've got people that you're engaging, people that are ready to be asked, number of people who have asked, and that will help you monitor progress. And it also helps you to see where you're getting stuck. So if you've identified people you've researched, you've started to engage them, but you're not asking, it helps you to look at actually what's behind that. Is it a training issue that your fundraisers aren't comfortable with asking? Is it that you don't have the right project, you don't have a tangible project or you know, any sort of project to go to your major donors with? And then in terms of those high level KPIs, you want to be looking at things like the number and the value of repeat donors, number and value of multi-year pledges, for example, numbers of major donors, you know, that that's an easy one, isn't it? But not just the numbers of major donors, but track the growth over time so that you can show that the programme is growing. There's lots. I mean, you can get a bit overwhelmed with KPIs, and you can have lots and lots. I think the main thing is that they have to serve a purpose and they have to be meaningful, and they have to help you identify patterns and strengths and areas that need a bit more work. And the main thing with major donor KPIs is to show progress, not just income. What other KPIs do other people use, especially if you're just starting out? So you can get a bit too over involved or over complicated. It's raining here today. It's been so hot yesterday. I'm sure it was with you as well. And today I've got the doors wide open and it's pouring with rain, and it's that lovely smell of when the really hot ground becomes sodden, and it's just quite lovely. Right, Anthony, prospecting potential major donors, where do you look? Has anyone used LinkedIn Sales Navigator? Oh, that's a good question. I'd like to know more about that as well. I haven't used it, so that would be great. I'd love to hear more about that if any of you have used it. Right, so where do you find potential new major donors? This comes up, probably, I would say this comes up every month. So I'm sorry if you come every month and you hear me repeating myself. I do apologise. So I always think that the best place to find new major donors is starting with who is already supporting you. Who's already close to the charity and has a connection or is already supporting you, that you, at whatever level, that has the potential for you to build a relationship with and engage as a major donor. So have a look through your database, first of all, if you haven't done already. That's where I would start. You know, track who's giving over a certain level over time. So maybe go back 5 years. Who's giving wherever you've set your major donor level, who's giving that amount cumulatively, because sometimes they've slipped under the radar. You know, say your major donor level is £5,000. If you're only looking for people that have given 5,000 and above, you're missing all those people that might have given you 3,000 every year, for example, for 5 years. So have a look at cumulative giving. You can also look at things like whether they're making their gift through a donor advised fund or through whether they've got a CAF account, whether they're banking through Coots, Hodes, the other big private banks where you have to have a certain level of income investment with them. You can look at wealthy postcodes, affluent postcodes. You can look at identify people's job titles if you've got them. So, you know, if someone's vice president of whatever, Goldman Sachs, then that would indicate a certain level of wealth. So I would look at that. If you're lucky enough and you're big enough charity to have a mid-gift programme, then work really, really closely with your mid-gift team and identify, you know, some patterns of giving. Is someone increasing their gift? Have they been increasing each appeal, mid-value appeal? Has it been slowly going up? You know, how could you engage them more as more on a more personalised basis, more tailored basis? And then there's also talking to your trustees, patrons, ambassadors, doing network mapping. So sitting down with them and identifying who they know within their communities and the networks that they're part of. And that's a whole nother sort of conversation around how you do that. But, you know, identifying the connections of the people closest to your charity can be a really good way to identify new major donors, and asking them to make peer introductions to those people. It can work extraordinarily well. It has to be done in the right way. If people think you're just going to roll them out and ask them for money, they tend to get the heebie-jeebies. So it's about exploring the networks and that can be, you know, where they work. It could be faith groups that they're part of, community groups, Rotaries, WIs, schools that they have connections with, hobbies and interests, people they might know through a golf club or any other sporting activity that they do. And then, of course, you've got wealth screening, which is another step in terms of looking through your database. But, you know, external companies can screen the data you give them of people that have donated, and they can come back to you to identify their capacity to give, so their wealth capacity. So that can also be really helpful. And you can do cold names research, which is where you ask an external company, you kind of say, okay, find me 50 people who have a philanthropic interest in whatever your cause area is. And if you're a local or regional charity, you can put parameters on geographically, and they'd identify people that have the capacity to give, but also that have are sort of stated philanthropists or people that have given to similar causes to yours in the past. The wealth screening and new names research obviously come at a cost. And my top tip there would be that you have to be prepared to do the follow-up. You can't just sit on that information, and you shouldn't just store it on your database without having any plan of engaging those people. And it can take quite a lot of work on identifying supporter journeys and moving, particularly when you've done wealth screening, moving people from maybe a £5 a month all the way through to major donors. So it's a long-term investment, but it does help build your prospect portfolio. So there's a question about an interim CEO taking over after a long-standing CEO went off sick and the relationships have gone cold. What steps can I take to create new ones to cultivate new and cold donors? So assuming I can find them. So I think possibly we've just covered that in the last question, but also in the question earlier with Alice about how do you, if you're new to a role, how do you engage people? I think your closest donors, give them a call, explain that you're taken on, that you're interim CEO and you're really curious about the supporters and you want to get to know people. Find out the key issues from them. As the chief executive, it's a great chance to get people on the inside track, isn't it? What are the key things what are the key challenges that those donors see for your charity? What's been their experience as a donor of the charity? What could you do better? What could you improve, and use it as a really real learning experience? So Francis, I've got a challenge finding donors that will support medium-sized charities over a longer period of time. Unrestricted income would be preferred to help keep the day-to-day running going. Unrestricted income is so important, isn't it? And major donors do give unrestricted, but the higher the level that a donor is giving, the research shows that they expect it to go towards something specific and something tangible. So you do need to be prepared to, if you're engaging people, for it to be project based. But you can obviously build your core costs into that. And some major donors will give really high levels to core costs. So I've just been working with a small sustainability charity, and they have quite a small handful of major donors, and we were working with them to increase their major donor program. But they have done fantastic work with them. They've got personalised relationships. They're really high wealth capacity donors, and they have funded posts and salaries because the key, Francis, I think there is to show them the difference that is making to the charity. So they funded a chief executive post, which is just amazing. How brilliant that it's someone that just gets why that post was needed, and it was built on the impact that post was going to have, the transformation it would have on the charity, and what that enabled the charity to do. So the impact, so not just we need a chief executive, but actually that's kind of irrelevant. It was about what is the outcome of having that chief executive post, what difference is it going to make, what impact is it going to make on the work that we're doing and what we're trying to achieve? How does that affect us going forward over the next 5 or 10 years? So there are major donors that will give high levels unrestricted, but generally the more they give, the more they're likely to want that to go to something tangible. Although a salaried post, for example, is something tangible. It's got to make business sense to them, hasn't it? But there are more and more trusts, I think, since COVID, giving unrestricted. And people like the Four, who I know are really hard to, but I think they're really hard to get any money out of. I heard of a local charity here in Kent recently who had gained a gift for a grant from the Four, and that was paying for them to have a corporate fundraiser, and that was their first paid fundraising post. So it is out there. I think if you're a medium-sized charity, you know, I don't know if you're a local or regional charity either, but, you know, I think if you're smaller or medium-sized or a local or regional, you have got more opportunity to engage people on a personalised basis. You know, it's easier to get out and go and see them. You probably haven't got as many as the large charities in your portfolio. You haven't got like hundreds and hundreds of major donors. So, Francis, I would just say, like, really try and engage the donors that you do have and build a relationship with them, and talk to them about the difference their gift can make over time. So, you know, often major donors will pledge over 3 years. Once they realise the impact that will have, and what it means to the charity. So I hope that helps. It's kind of $1 million question, isn't it? Because I'm sure you'd all love to find donors that, you know, are going to support your charity over a long period of time with unrestricted funding. But it is about, I think, getting to know your donors, building those relationships, tailoring and personalising everything that you do, understanding what motivates them, and really getting across the organisation's needs and where they can have a transformative impact. I would think that's probably the way to do that. Oh, good. Some people have chipped in about top tips for Big Give as well, and how to engage a major donor to pledge the amount. There's one, Sean, talking about reliant upon trustee communications at the moment and attempting to grow your database. So I think we've covered that, Sean. Please let me know if there's anything else. There's a question about trusts and foundations wanting new projects. We find most helpful support is for our ongoing work. It's a bit like the unrestricted that we've just been talking about, isn't it? Stacey Keys, who is Tree Fundraising's trust, who's absolutely brilliant, does these for trusts and foundations, and she's also has some on-demand webinars, and I think they're only £30 plus VAT. They're not a huge amount of money, and one of them is about projectizing your ongoing costs. So how to take your ongoing costs and kind of reinvent them into projects that are appealing, and have really clear outcomes and impact measurement for trusts and foundations. So that might be a good thing. That if you look on the Moneytree website, they've got a list of all the webinars on there, and you can sign up to Trust and Foundations live chats as well. And she's great. Stacey's got tons of experience and full of good practical tips. Tips on how to find, categorise potential mid-tier and major donors in your warm contact base. So we've covered that to start the major donor programme. Oh, loads of you getting back about the Big Gift. That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Oh, seeking creative ways to re-engage lapsed major donors and inspire them to begin giving again. Yes, to a certain extent, it all depends whether they've lapsed whilst you've been there, or whether they kind of gave and maybe weren't looked after as well as they could have been, and then you've come into a load of lapsed donors. Because that happens, doesn't it? It's a bit like we talked earlier with Alice, where and the person who's an interim chief exec, you know, that is a good opportunity to just try and rekindle the relationship. But they did at one stage care a lot about your charity. I worked with a client recently where they had done an appeal 10 years ago and they'd raised over £1 million. They had a fantastic appeal board. And then a new chief executive came in and decided that they didn't need a major donor programme and they didn't need this appeal board anymore. And they never got anything about the impact. They knew that they'd raised the money, but they weren't stewarded. They didn't get an impact report. They didn't even really get a thank you. All they got was like, oh, we're disbanding the appeal board. And 10 years later, they wanted to do a capital appeal. And of course, these were really big philanthropists as well. They hadn't got any contact with them. But you know, what was amazing was the number of those people that were willing to talk to us doing a feasibility study for a capital appeal, and the amount of, you know, there were 3 or 4 of those donors who were willing to talk to me. And, you know, I listened to the challenges, I listened to the experience that they'd had, but they were people that had really cared about this charity and really wanted it to do well. And it was a really good opportunity to start to re-engage them in a very careful way. You know, they were a long way from giving again and feeling confident in the charity, but there had been a change of chief executive, there had been a change of philanthropy team. And I guess what we were doing was asking permission to start again with them and to try and do it better. So sometimes just being really honest. If they're lapsed because it's something that you've done, then, you know, be honest about that. Apologise. Again, talk to them about you want to build better relationships. If they're lapsed, and that's not the situation at all, they've just lapsed. I mean, you can invite them to events, can't you? You can start inviting them to if you're doing webinars, virtual events, or face-to-face events. You could again look at whether your trustees know them. Do any of your senior staff that might still be at the charity know them? You know, is there a peer that you can get to kind of re-engage them, maybe host a project visit and invite them along? It also all depends whether they've opted out of comms as well, doesn't it? Sometimes it's really hard, you know, how do you engage lapsed donors who have opted out of comms and they're still kind of sitting in your major donor portfolio? Sometimes you've got to look at your portfolio and decide who needs to come out of it. If they've given once, they've never expressed an interest in giving again, they're not engaging in any comms that they've been sent. But you can try and, you know, in individual giving, you do lots of reactivation mailings and things like that. I mean, they're not really for major donor fundraising, are they? But you could try a very tailored appeal, particularly if you've got something really important coming up. Again, I'd look back at what were their motivations, what were they most interested in, what's their history with the charity. So you can kind of pick up, maybe you've got a new project or a new piece of research that's been done that you think would be really interesting for them. Yeah, hopefully that helps. Oh, loads of you are working on the Big Give application, aren't you? Right, we've got about 10 minutes left. So I think this is probably quite a good question. At what level do attendees consider major, please? Because it's all different, isn't it? So yeah, what is your level? How do you define a major gift? What does a major donor look like to you? I always think of them as it's the level at which, two things. It's the level at which, one, it's going to make a significant difference to the work that you do. And secondly, it's a level at which you're willing to put the resources behind working with those donors in a completely personalised and tailored way. And those are the two things that I would look at. And also bear in mind that it can move. So I've worked with organisations that, you know, they're really tiny and they've started off with their major donor level being £500, but, you know, over time that's moved and maybe it does shift up to 2,500 or 5,000 plus. There are other organisations that don't consider someone a major donor unless they've given 50,000 plus. So I think I don't think there's a set answer, and I don't think you should be particularly swayed by what other people do. I think it is really about, you know, yeah, where is it going to make a significant impact, and at what point are you willing and have the resources to put behind that group of people, because it is intensive and it is individual and personalised. What I will say is a lot of sort of smaller charities or medium-sized charities put it at 5,000, which seems a fairly kind of common benchmark. I think it's also important to keep reviewing it. If you're going to set your major donor level at quite low, do keep reviewing it, because if you set it at £500 and then you grow that portfolio and you've got lots and lots of donors that are giving you £500, maybe that's time that you need to up it, because you know, you could have, it's not that those donors aren't important, because they are important, but actually if you've got a huge number of them and there's only one of you don't have the time to give them a really good experience with your charity. And I think that's really important to keep remembering as a major donor fundraising. You know, you want people to have a good experience. You want your major donors to feel valued and to know what difference they're making, and to feel part of what you do. And if you've got a huge volume of people, but you haven't got the resources to extend staff, then you're not necessarily going to be able to have that personalised relationship with those people. And it may not be the best use of your time as well. So do keep reviewing it as it grows and as you grow and mature as an organisation. And I think the key thing is you don't need lots and lots of major donors to start a major donor programme. You know, identify those people, have a look at your database, identify those people that are giving, as we talked about earlier. That charity I was talking about, the sustainability charity, they've probably got 5 or 6 major donors, but they bring in a really significant amount of their income, a significant proportion of their income. So you don't need lots and lots of major donors, but you do need to be able to look after them. Oh, lots of you got on there about where you place your major donor levels. Oh, that's brilliant. As I said earlier, my name's not Alexandra, I'm not Alex. I did look into how I could change it to Jane. My name's Jane Redman. I couldn't work it out when I got on here. So yeah, sorry about that, but I'm Jane. But if you want to hook up with me on LinkedIn, then please do. I'm over there on LinkedIn. So we've only got about 5 minutes left. I wanted to go back to at the beginning when we talked about, sorry, Sarah. Sorry, it does say that I'm Alexandra, so I wouldn't expect you to know that that's not my name. Oh, I can't keep up with the chat this week. It's been so good. There's been so many of you. Thank you so much for joining me. I want to come back to this resilience thing. And when I went to that growth mindset workshop, they showed a really good video of Andy Murray, who has what's called a personal cue card. And you can find it on YouTube. And it was noticed when he was in a tennis match once at the breaks between the games. He would go back and he'd look at something that he had under his towel, and the camera zoomed in on it, and it was a personal cue card. And it's like, actually, when you're feeling nervous or anything things aren't going to go to plan, just 4 or 5 things on this cue card that put you back in the right mindset. And some of his were very technical about how we should respond to shots. Some of them were things like trust the process. So remember, you know, I guess when you've had all that coaching, there's a process to winning games. You know what that is, but it's easy to forget it in the moment. And I thought that's such a good idea, isn't it? Like we could all do with a personal cue card. You know, what would go on yours? 3 or 4 things that when you're feeling a bit down or a bit unconfident or a bit despondent, you know, what are you going to add to that that's going to remind you of why you do the job that you do? Maybe it is a note to say, go and chat to donors, go and chat to beneficiaries, spend time with the operational staff that you have. There's all sorts of things, aren't there? I've got little post-it notes up behind my computer in my office, you know, about things like, you know, stop overthinking things. You can't think your way out of overthinking. But yeah, what would be on your cue card? The point of the workshop that I went to was around getting your kids who are doing their GCSEs or A levels to have this in their mind as personal cue cards. So if they get stuck in an exam, it's things like, you know, pause, breathe, take a drink of water, reread the question, come back to it, leave it and come back to it later. All these things that in the moment of stress and high pressure, it's quite easy to forget. So it might be quite helpful to have a little mental cue card as well when you have an ask meeting, couldn't it, before, if you're really nervous about it, and just like take a breath before you ask. Remember not to talk when you've asked someone for a gift. Remember not to jump in and be the first one to talk. So these little cues that you could have. Right, I hope that I answered your questions. I tried to get through as many as I could, so I feel like I've rattled loads of stuff off really, really quickly. I hope that it has been helpful. If we didn't answer your questions, You can look on the on Facebook. There is the Major Donor Fundraising Group, and there is the Trust Fundraising Group, and Money Tree Fundraising hosts both of them. So if you've got questions, pop it on there. If you've got something we didn't answer, maybe come next time and get in there first with your questions. Maybe email Money Tree Fundraising and they can give me some questions. Don't forget that you can find lots of free resources on Money Tree Fundraising website, and this recording will get posted onto the YouTube channel and also sent out to you by email. We're having a break in August because of the summer holidays, but we'll be back with these monthly live chats in September. So in the meantime, have a really wonderful summer. Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing fantastic work, all of you. And thank you for joining me. And I look forward to seeing some of you later in the year. Thanks ever so much. Have a good day. Bye bye.